Julian here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make dark, atmospheric techno in the style of Fautzi. As usual, you can get the full project file, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video is available right at the top of the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there, because it's already available. And yeah, let's dive in. So, we're on 128 BPM. Today we're going to be talking more about his more sort of dark, aggressive work like you hear on his Pole Group release, and stuff more like that. So the first sound that we have here is this lead, which sounds like this. So here's the MIDI. It's really simple. It's just this continuous. So the way we made this is it's essentially just two notes. It's just F sharp and C. So it's like this kind of, very dark, almost like evil sounding thing where you just basically choose a note, whatever your root note is, and then it's 6 notes up from that. And then it's just like constantly going. And what we have here also is what you would call a polyrhythm. So the way a polyrhythm works is polyrhythms are only relative, essentially. So what it is like if you listen to this, the rest of the track is going 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, like it's counted out. The bars are very, straightforward, cut and dry. But then with this, if you notice, what's happening is it's really just this pattern. It's just that, and then we're restarting that at like all these different times, because you can see like it starts here, but then we have it here, then we have it here. So it's like what's happening here is you have this thing kind of constantly going in this hypnotic circling motion, while everything else is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this creates a polyrhythm. And yeah, they're really great for this style of techno because, again, this is only 2 notes. It's a really simple lead, but you can create a really interesting sound this way. So for the sound, this is just made with some simple FM synthesis stuff. You can see it's just 4 sine waves. It seems more complicated than it is, really. The way you create a sound like this is you start just with the first oscillator. You can see the envelope is set like that. And then I have the envelopes on the other ones. I'm kind of playing around with really just the second one, but then we're playing around with like where the chorus pitch is on these other ones. And yeah, this is really what creates the sound. It's like all these different oscillators FMing each other and then just being at different octaves. And then we have those going into a low pass filter which has an envelope on it, so that's creating that pluckiness. And then I also have an LFO actually changing the pitch of oscillators C and D. So here's without that. And then with it, you hear there's a lot more movement. It just sounds kind of like more hypnotic this way. It's a good technique. I really recommend just playing around with like different stuff like that. Like you can get really creative in the style because it doesn't need to be so melodic and so like perfectly on the note. So like having an LFO just moving the pitches of your oscillators, like why not? It sounds cool. You also notice I have the transpose here at -17. So it's playing actually kind of like a dissonant thing from that drone you can hear. But that's actually creating a lot of the effect of like how this track sounds essentially. It's like the dissonance between this lead and then the other elements that have a pitch in here. And yeah, and then that's just going through this chorus. You can see I have the feedback turned up a bunch, so that is creating some cool like metallic sounds. Here's without it. And with it, that creates that sort of like I almost want to call it like a tripping effect. But then that's going through a saturator, which you can see is hitting pretty hard. We've got this grain delay here. So here's without this. And with it, so that's adding a little bit more of that sort of metallic overtone. It's very subtle, but you can hear like the subtle stuff makes a big difference. And then we just have a bit of auto pan here, which is simulating this being sidechained. That's making it sort of pulse up and down. And also that's playing into the polyrhythm a lot because, you're hearing this while you're hearing the notes kind of jump around. You can see how, like, it's a very simple sound, but there's complex stuff happening underneath the hood to make it sound really exciting and, full. Then we just have it going through a little bit of 8th note echo and a high pass filter. And that's the lead. Then we have this drone. So this is just playing one note. You can see it's actually playing G. So again, just like super dissonant with the lead, but this is a lot of what creates the sound in this track. And something I noticed is like when I was referencing this, like if you don't have this drone in here, it's kind of missing something. As much as it is kind of like a background element, the drone is adding a lot to the track, and it really matters, like, in terms of the overall vibe of the track, especially because these tracks aren't just about an 8-bar loop. Like, I'm showing you the elements here, but really a big part of music is how it develops over time and how the track is moving and stuff like that. And it's like, you know, this drone is something you can automate this throughout the track. You can automate any parameter. You could just have it like fading in and out with the volume or with a low pass filter, something like that. But it's going to add a lot of movement to the arrangement of the track to have this. So for the sound with this one, this is also made with FM. The way this is working here, as you can see, is very similar to that first sound actually. It's just less plucky. So we have 3 sine waves here, and then I just have these at different octaves where you can see the second one is at 3. And then I'm using this fine tune here. So this actually plays a big part in the sound. Here is without this. Hear how it just kind of is like one note? And then with it, you hear how it becomes this like dissonant, almost like metallic, very textured sound. So that's great. If you're trying to make these types of drones, try using some detune, because that's going to add a lot of movement and just create that sort of like uneasy sort of feel. And then I also have an LFO a little bit on this filter here. So that's what's making it kind of like that. And it's also being pitched up a lot. Then I just have some chorus as well as a bit of reverb, so these are just giving it some space. And then finally we just have another auto pan doing that same, like simulating sidechaining this to the kick. And that's it for the drone. Then we have the hi-hats. So it's 3 layers. We have this 909 hi-hat. You know, just like a standard, really fat 909 sample. You can see I've got the velocities kind of staggered, so it's like, you know, just gives it a little bit more movement and brings it to life a little bit. And then that's just going through a high pass filter. This one's really more, you can also see I shortened it a little bit. This one's really more about just getting like a really fat, hard hitting 909 hi-hat that's gonna like over top of the beat. Like if you have it too quiet in the mix, like a lot of times when I hear people's tracks, they'll have it down like here. And it's like, you know, it doesn't really have as much energy that way. You really want this right up front in the mix. Then we have the synth hi-hat, which I made with operator, and it sounds like this. So this is a really simple sound. This is just playing on the upbeats. It's meant to really not even be that noticeable. It's just putting a little bit of emphasis on the upbeats. So the way we made this is just a little bit of white noise inside of operator, and then it's just going through a bandpass. Here's without the bandpass. And then I just have that going through some drum bus, because typically when you make hi-hats with synths like this, it can sound, you know, it can be kind of hard to get it away from that like dry synth sound, so to speak. So the drum bus really helps with that. And then we just have this reversed 808 ride. So this is just adding that like sort of like sweeping thing, which this is really popular in these tracks. Like it's not always an 808 ride. You can use a lot of different samples for this. The 808 is good because it's a classic sound. But it's basically just taking this here and it's just like creating that sort of like pulsing thing, you know, that's really a big part of the groove in these tracks. Like if you just have these hi-hats, it just doesn't quite have that same level of like, sort of like it's almost pulling you up. And then on the group of those, we just have a bit of reverb and some drum bus. So here's without those. You can hear it's just a little bit too like dry and clean without those. Again, this is really about the texture and the atmosphere. So the reverb kind of gives these some space, puts them in the same room together, and then we have the drum bus to make them really powerful and really full. And this is again like a big part of making that 909 hi-hat to like really stand out on top of the mix. And then we have these noises which start with this one. So this is made using operator. I think there's a lot of noise in these tracks. You know, it's a big part of the atmosphere of these tracks. A lot of times, like, the track will even just be, like, the noises and the drums. Like that. And so, I think a lot of these noises are made in a lot of different ways. You know, you can sample like industrial noises, you can sample vinyl noises, I think there's a lot of modular synthesis happening here, but you can also just make them with operator. You know, these are one of the sounds, it really doesn't matter at all how you make it. You can spend 5 hours making this on a modular synth, or you can spend 5 minutes making this on operator. It's just about creating the like big textured sort of sound. So the way I made this first one is it's just this saw 6 wave, and then it's being FM'd a bunch with some white noise. And then it's also going through a bandpass, so here's without that. That also creates the sort of like hissing sound. And then also have this LFO on here just moving the filter cutoff a little tiny bit. You know, it's all about creating those like little subtle movements that are going to bring it to life. I think this is why people like modular synthesis a lot, is because it does that, and there's a lot of ways to create those little movements, but there's also a lot of ways to create those little movements just inside of operator, like with this LFO. Then it's just going through a bit of chorus and some reverb to kind of give it a bit more space. Then I have this auto pan, so it's bouncing off the kick, and then we have a high pass filter, and then we have the second noise. So this one is a bit more aggressive. You know, the idea here is that we're layering these both together, and we have one in the mid-range and then one in the high end. So this one is made in actually a similar way. You can see we have a sine wave, another sine wave, and then those are being FM'd with white noise. So you get a little bit more of a tone out of this one. And then I just have those going into a low pass. So here's without that. And with it, you can hear it makes it a bit more aggressive. Then we have this grain delay. Here's without that. So you can hear that's creating a big part of that sort of like, you know, crunchy, like spaced out sound with this one. The key here is the spray and the frequency knob. If I start turning those up, see how it doesn't quite have that same texture, but then when you turn it down. So I definitely recommend playing with those. Then we have some overdrive. Here's without that. So you can see, this is also really important for the sound. You know, this is meant to just be this like crunchy, hard-hitting noise. So that's doing that. Then we have a high pass and an auto pan. And then on the group of noises, I just have a bit of drum bus and then some filtering. So just like a high pass and then a high end boost. So here is with nothing on the group. And then with the effects. So I think it's really important to do something like this. Like, you know, because it's meant to really sound like these noises are just super crunchy, super textured, and like really being pushed as far as they can go. And that's what this drum bus is doing, you know. It just gives you that really like crunchy feel, and it also glues them together, so it's just going to kind of sound like one big fat noise. And then we also just have like the high pass, you know, to make sure there's not any nasty low end here that's going to get in the way of the kick. And then this high end boost just to bring out some sharpness. And then we have this little kick percussion, which sounds like this. So if I'm playing this with the kick, you can hear. It's almost like a bit of call and response with the bass line, because the bass line's like. And then it's like. And this is really simple. The way I made this is it's just actually the kick. It's one of the kick layers, because there's 2 layers to the kick in this track. And I just put it through a bandpass filter. So there's no bandpass. And then with it, and then it's just going through some saturator. And this is something I've noticed in a lot of these tracks. It gives you like that little subtle movement, because every single time there's like this 16th note essentially. That adds like a lot of groove and movement to the track with really just like one note. Then we have the kick, which sounds like this. And so this is 2 layers. It's this more like 909 style kick, which I've taken, and then I just have this EQ3 on here. So we're getting just the low end from that, and then it's this like more clicky, sort of punchy kick. And then you can see I use the EQ3 on that to take just the mid-range and the high end, and then you put them together. And you get one really fat kick. And the reason why I did this is because, you know, that first kick had a really good low end to it. It was really fat, but it didn't really have the like click and like the punch to it like I wanted. But then this kick didn't really have the low end to it, but it did have the click and punch. So you just put them together, And there you go. And so, this is how layering should work. Like, when you're trying to layer your kicks together, you shouldn't just be taking them and, like, trying to put two kicks together and do all this crazy compression and stuff. Like, if you just have two sounds where one is the low end, one is the mid-range and highs, or maybe, like, one's the low end, one's the mid-range, and one is the high end, you don't really need to do too much. All we really have here is just some saturator to make it punch a bit more. And it's just like a powerful kick. Then we have the bass line, which sounds like this. So this is a little bit of a different method of making a techno bass line than I've shown you guys before. I'm pretty sure this is my first time showing you this way to do it. This is made using a synth. So typically to make a techno bass, it would be like a rumble, where you either take like your kick and put some reverb on it and delay, or maybe you just take your kick and filter it and make a rumble out of that. And those are definitely used in these tracks. But I'll also say, like, I think the bass line made with the synth works really well. And I've heard this in a lot of, not just his tracks, but also a lot of other tracks in the style. Because you can kind of make it move a bit more. With that, like, if you just were using your kick to create a bass, it would just be. And yeah, then the key is just getting it to be like as fat as a rumble bass would. So for the notes on this one, it's really simple. It's just C and then C an octave up. Like nothing too crazy there. But then for the sound, it's made using operator. So lots of FM synthesis here. I definitely recommend starting with FM for these style of tracks because you're going to get a lot more texture and just color out of the sounds, honestly. So this is just a sine wave with a little bit of FM from a second sine wave. Kind of add some harmonic content, and then it's being low passed. And then I have this going through a drum bus and a limiter. So here it is without these. With the drum bus. And then with the limiter. So the drum bus is obviously just, making this a lot fatter, a lot more full. The limiter is really just to give it that extra push. Like, this might seem like something you wouldn't really want to do. It's more for, like, creative effects than it is for mixing. Like, I'm not using this limiter to mix it in the track. I'm using the limiter because I was, again, trying to make this as fat as a rumble bass. Typically, a rumble bass, what makes it so full is that it has a really flat response. Like, it's really just like this long rumble that's held out over time. And a lot of times with a synth, it can be hard to get that, especially like when you're bouncing up notes and stuff like that. Some notes will be louder. Sometimes, for whatever reason, you just don't really get that fullness to it. So just blasting the limiter on this one was a great way to get it to, like, just really come out like that and really feel full. Even if it is a little compressed, again, it's more for, like, creative effects than it is for mixing. And then I just had this being sidechained to the kick. And then on the group here, we just have a little bit of saturation just to tie the kick and bass together. Here's without those, or without it. And then with it, so you can hear, like, it just makes it so it's one. Like, in this style, you really want the kick and the bass to kind of just come together as one just really deep, fat, and powerful thing like this. And the saturator is a great way to facilitate that. And yeah, so that's going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get this full project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that in the description on my Bandcamp for just $5. It's a great way to support me if you guys have been enjoying these videos. I don't make a whole lot off of YouTube, but with the sample packs and different stuff like this, I'm able to keep going and keep bringing you guys all these awesome new videos. And yeah, thank you so much everybody for all the support, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.